The human population is a topic of great controversy, and while there have always been Bond villain-style plots afoot, the topic has come back to the top of the news cycle with the rise of the climate change movement. Joining me to discuss this is Rebecca Weisser. Rebecca, welcome to the show.
Pleasure to be here, Alexandra.
Rebecca, you've written a piece this week called Depopulate and Perish, Blame Falling Birth Rates on Climate Change. Now, you've begun with a quote from Labor Immigration Minister Arthur Calwell, in which he said, and I quote, "We have 25 years at most to populate this country before the yellow races are down on us," end quote. Now, sometimes the left need to be reminded of what their leaders have said as they embark on this puritanical holier-than-thou quest. But Rebecca, you've made the point that mass migration has driven Australia ever since its conception. When is enough enough?
Well, the question I really look at in this article, rather than when is enough, is sort of what's just actually going on at the moment with our population. And I guess I'm being driven partly by concerns that I've raised in an earlier article, which was in the Spectator Australia, called "Where Have All the Babies Gone?" And that was looking at, was there some kind of an impact from vaccines on reproduction rates and fertility? We had to wait a very long time to get the data for 2022, which has just come out now in the middle of 2023. And it shows us that there was a very big decline in births in 2022. And when you add that together with the fact that we had a very big increase in deaths, it looks sort of dire at the moment, really. But I mean, obviously it's just 1 year. The question really is what's happening now and what's going to happen in the future.
Well, governments, of course, like to see large numbers of young people in the country, but they don't seem to really care whether those numbers come from Australian citizens or whether they import them via mass migration. And whenever Australians are actually asked what they think of the latter, they usually say, no, we don't want any more mass migration. Do you think that Australians are against the idea of a big Australia as a general concept, or is it more that they want to try and have their own children for a while this time and as you say, try and grow the Australian population here domestically for a while?
Well, I think the real crunch with mass migration is really all to do with services. Sometimes it's hard to tell, you know, theoretically, how would we know whether there are a lot of people settling in Australia in any 1 year or not? Well, one of the ways people notice it is if there is a failure to have enough of anything that they need, that there's a reduction in supply, or if there's overcrowding, for example, increase in traffic, you know, if there's not enough houses for sale, if they can't find somewhere to live. These sorts of things, on the one hand, obviously people find that very frustrating, and it is worrying that Australia has this enormous shortage of housing because we have a quite rapidly growing population on the one hand, because we've had such a large migration rate over the last more than 20 years. We've had very high rates of migration, and we haven't kept pace with that in terms of the provision of services. So I think that really makes a difference for people, you know, and worries them. You know, if they can't find a house at the moment, or if the price of houses is very high and they know that's being driven by a shortage of supply relative to demand, what's it going to look like when you've got another 250 or 300,000 people also competing for houses each year?
Yes, well, they like to say, oh, we're running out of water, therefore it's climate change. But the reality is our population has more than doubled and they haven't built any other major dam resources. And that's just one example of what's going on.